Welcome to the Infuse Your Future podcast, where we bring together people and ideas who are making the world a better place. I'm your host, Dr. C. In this podcast, you're going to hear solo episodes with various self-help topics. You're also going to hear guest speakers from all walks of life. If you're ready to experience the power of coaching, set up a complimentary 45-minute consultation with me at infuseyourfuture.com. And be sure to sign up for my mailing list for a free gift. Enjoy the show. Hey, everybody. I'd love to welcome my guest today, Dr. Emily Levy, who's going to be talking to us about ADHD and how to thrive, not just survive with you when you have ADHD. So hi, Dr. Levy. How are you?
Hi there. I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me today.
You're welcome. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and who you are, what you do, and how you got into the line of work you're in now?
I'd be happy to do that. Well, I'm currently the founder and director of EBL Coaching, which is a one-on-one tutoring program both for children and adults that specializes in helping students who have ADHD, learning challenges, and any other kind of academic difficulty. Just to date back, I actually grew up in the field of special education. My mother was the founder of a school for students with learning disabilities down in Florida, which is where I grew up. So I spent so much of my childhood working with students, observing students, and really watching them thrive with the right approaches and the right methodologies. And then formally, I went to Brown University for my undergraduate degree. I then received my master's degree in special education, as well as my doctorate degree in general education. And I started out personally working one-on-one with students who had ADHD and other kinds of learning challenges, and eventually saw what a tremendous need there was for these kinds of one-on-one services that I continued to grow and evolve. And now I oversee the instruction that takes place both virtually around the world and then in person locally in the New York and New Jersey area.
Well, thanks for what you do, because I know it's a really important part of life, especially for the families that are grappling with these issues.
Sure. Well, it's very rewarding, and it's really amazing to be able to help so many students and so many families through this journey.
Mm-hmm. And what makes you passionate about what you do?
Well, it's interesting. After I graduated college, I actually had a little diversion and I did a few years of finance, which is kind of the opposite of what I do now. But in that process, it really helped me draw back to my passion, which was helping students, helping children, watching them thrive. And it was almost because I had that experience of being in a job and a career that really I didn't find passion in. It kind of led me back to really my calling and to this field, which is so rewarding and really gives me the opportunity to help so many children and adults.
And so you do help adults as well as children?
We do. I would say we do more work with kids. It's more kind of K to 12, but we definitely do work with college students and with adults as well who have ADHD, reading, writing challenges, and that sort of thing.
And what sparked your interest in ADHD specifically?
Well, I think that, like I mentioned, it really sort of dates back to my childhood, where I grew up working at the school and observing and working with students who had both learning disabilities and ADHD, and just seeing what a difference it could make when students receive the right support, the right strategies, especially those who have ADHD. It really can be life-changing.
Now, for people out there who don't know ADHD, or what are the signs? Like, how can you tell both in a child and an adult? Because I would assume that it shows up differently. If you're scratching your head about someone's behavior or your own behavior, how do you know you have ADHD and that you should go check it out?
Sure. Well, some individuals have the hyperactive form of ADHD where they're bouncing off walls and really can't stay focused and they're all over the place. But those are the easier ones to identify, I would say. The ones that are more difficult to identify are the ones that are not necessarily bouncing off walls and are super hyperactive, but they struggle with things like organizational skills, time management. They're always running late. They're always losing their belongings. They come across as scattered. They are not as reliable as perhaps others could be. So these are kind of some classic skills that may not necessarily be ADHD, but they're often associated with ADHD, having these kind of weaker executive functioning skills.
I've heard people who don't understand it say, say things like, everybody has those problems. These are people that are just making excuses, or these are people that are lazy. And as someone who has an ADHD person in my life, and the more I learn, realizing that I probably have it myself, and I know that it's very real,
Mm.
and that these people are not lazy, and they're not just trying to make excuses. What do you say to those people?
Well, I think that there may be some people might have mild challenges with things like organizational skills, time management, and so forth. But for others, it's not so mild, and it really affects their lives. And it's real. It's not something that's made up. And I think that once it's identified that that person has ADHD, it can really be eye-opening as to how many resources are available to help them through these challenges and to really ultimately improve their lives.
Yeah, so true. Now, let's take first the children and then the adults.
Sure.
What are the top three tools, in your opinion, that can help a child who's struggling with ADHD get back into a nice flow so that they can be academically and socially successful?
Well, I think there's many tools, and many of these tools apply both to children as well as to adults. So, one, for instance, is learning how to manage their time more effectively. And one exercise that we often do with students is we teach them the difference between estimated time versus actual time. Meaning, let's say they have a math homework sheet to do that they need to complete. What we would do is have them estimate how long they think it will take to complete that math worksheet. They might say it'll take 5 minutes. A lot of them think it takes a lot less than it does. And then as they do the worksheet, we kind of keep a clock on the side so that we can track how long it actually takes. And then we compare the difference between the estimated time versus the actual time. And we find that when individuals have difficulty with time management and they're unrealistic with how long something might take to complete, in the beginning, there's a big discrepancy between those two times. But the more we practice the strategy, the more attention we bring to it, the more realistic they become with their time and the more they can improve their time management skills. And that's a strategy that can apply to adults as well. So it's really, a lot of these are kind of universal strategies. There's also systems and tools that we use for organization. So for instance, for younger kids, there's a 3-tier organizational system that we use for managing their papers, which I know a lot of schoolwork is becoming more digital, but there's still, especially when they're younger, a lot of papers that come home. So we set up a 3-tier system. One is a notebook that they take with them on a regular basis. One day a week, we designate that as their clean out their working notebook day. They put it into the appropriate section of an accordion file. And then if they have a great project or great essay that they wrote and they want to save for the long term, then we have more of a filing drawer. So we're kind of we're making it more systematic, teaching them systems for how to organize. We also encourage students, especially when they're younger, to use an assignment book. Even if they think they can keep everything in their head, they almost never can. They end up forgetting assignments or they end up forgetting to turn them in. So managing their assignments in a calendar, whether it's paper or whether it's digital now, if they prefer that, it's really important to have everything mapped out so they can see what's coming up for the day, for the week, and even for the month.
Right. And I would imagine that even though things are becoming more digital, it's also important to have a digital organization system, because I know my homepage on my computer is just chock full of different files for different projects and different subjects. And I know it can be really challenging when you don't have a good system digitally to find what you want to find when you want to find it without having to dig through multiple folders.
Absolutely. And that's something we do as well, as helping students to manage their digital files and create digital files and systems within that. So absolutely.
So time management, organization systems, any other big tools you want to discuss for people?
Managing an assignment book is another important one. When students get older, we work on strategies for how to take effective notes. That tends to be an important one, which of course is something for adults as well. And then as we get into sort of the adult realm, the older students realm, there's a lot of new apps and tools that we can use with our phone that can help with ADHD. For example, if there are 3 different places you need to be in one day, we might just use the calendar on that comes with an iPhone or any kind of smartphone and set up alerts where 20 minutes before, you get an alert reminder that, oh, I have that coming up. Or if it's something that takes an hour to get to, well, let's set an alert an hour before so that you know what time you need to leave, and that pops up and it makes a noise so that you can get there on time. So really utilizing devices that we already have to help manage ADHD is often very helpful.
Now, what do you see as the most challenging aspect of adult ADHD? I believe that all of the news and research around ADHD has really gotten a big bump recently. But certainly for people like you and me, when we were growing up, we didn't hear about it much. Maybe you did because you were in the educational field, but certainly someone like me who was not in that educational field had never even heard of it until just a few years ago. So I'm sure that there are tens of thousands of people walking around out there that were never diagnosed with it, had never heard of it. What's the most common presentation of adult ADHD in your experience?
Well, I will first off saying I think it's more acknowledged now and certainly more diagnosed than it ever used to be. And I think historically there were these scattered people or disorganized people that didn't necessarily have a classification, but that's kind of what their reputation was like. Now there's more awareness. There's, like I said, more diagnoses. So there's definitely more recognition of ADHD. But I would say similar kinds of challenges, similar kinds of characteristics, scattered, disorganized, run late, turn things in late, forget to turn things in. And quite frankly, as adults, that can be very challenging with relationships, and it can be very challenging when it comes to maintaining a job and really being that reliable person that so many companies look for.
Right, and paying your bills and all of that good stuff.
Exactly, exactly.
One of the things you talk about is being able to thrive with the ADHD. So I know that there are a lot of systems in place for children with ADHD to kind of help them thrive. And, it looks like it's being addressed more and more frequently in the school system, which is fantastic. But how about adults? How do you help adults thrive with their ADHD?
Well, one thing I will say about adults is that some of the most successful people in the world, CEOs, entrepreneurs, have ADHD. They tend to be very creative and visionaries. Of course, I'm generalizing, but they have these amazing ideas, big picture thinkers. It's really more of those details that can bring them down. So I find that there are many, again, CEOs, executives that will utilize other resources to help them with what they have difficulty with and focus on their gifts. And there are many gifts that are associated with ADHD. With that said, I do think when it comes to adults, the first step is really identifying their specific challenges, meaning not everyone who has ADHD struggles with the same kinds of things. We've had students who have ADHD and are actually very organized, but have no sense of time and they procrastinate. So I think step one is really identifying what are my challenges that I'm having difficulty with, and then let's tackle systems to help me with those particular times. If one of my biggest issue as an adult is that I'm constantly running late, well, I'm going to map out my day for the beginning of the week for every day. Where do I need to be? When do I need to be there? What time do I need to leave? Put all of that in my calendar and follow that calendar. So it's really, again, identifying what my challenges are and then working on systems to address those challenges and then making sure I follow through with those systems.
Right. And I would assume it would be helpful to have someone helping you follow through, like an accountability partner or just a friend who wants to see you succeed or a coach.
Absolutely. Makes a big difference.
I love that you mentioned gifts of ADHD. That's one thing that I try to tell my son when he's feeling down. I'm like, you have to look at this as a gift. Now, if we're talking about ADHD as a gift, can you talk about that a little bit? How is it a gift? Why is it a gift? And how can you see it as a gift?
Sure. Well, by the way, I say this about dyslexia and other learning disabilities as well. Nobody is perfect. Whether you have a classification or not, we all have strengths, we all have weaknesses. But with ADHD, like I mentioned before, many people with ADHD go on to be very successful in life. And it's really because they often are visionaries, creative thinkers, big picture thinkers. They come up with innovative, unique ideas that others may not really come up with because they're so focused on minute details all the time. So these are real assets that can help someone thrive through life. Of course, getting through school can be a challenge because there's so much organization and so much executive functioning and time management that's involved in getting through school. So I think, though, focusing on the end goal of knowing that you have a lot of gifts and you will find that career that will play up those gifts, I think is key. And again, we all have strengths, we all have weaknesses. If there are areas where we're not as strong, let's try to find some strategies that will help us build those skills.
Do you feel like there's one or a set of careers that people with ADHD are the most successful at?
Not necessarily. I mean, I've seen individuals in so many different careers that have been successful. I think clearly the ones that are more detail oriented and involve a tremendous amount of organization, time management, are probably those will be more challenging for those who have ADHD. But sometimes you kind of have to work your way up until you get to that point where you can be a top executive or a CEO and really utilize those skills, those gifts that you have as someone with ADHD.
You know, it's funny as you're talking, for some reason, I keep thinking about Einstein and wondering if this is what he had, because my understanding is he could not keep track of his keys or any any minute details throughout his life, but obviously he was a genius. So I'm wondering if he had it.
Well, by the way, this has nothing to do with intellect. So many individuals with ADHD have very high IQs. And by the way, Einstein, we know he had dyslexia. Oftentimes, those who have dyslexia do also have ADHD. So it wouldn't be surprising to me if he had ADHD. We don't really know. But he's a perfect example of someone who was brilliant, innovative, had all these gifts despite the other challenges that he had as well.
Hmm. Now, what is it like for people to work with you? How do they find out about you? When they hire you, what does that look like?
Sure. So usually it's either a parent or an adult, if it's for themselves, who will reach out to us, and they'll tell us a little bit about what some of their difficulties are. And then from there, I match that individual with one of our specialists who specializes in whatever skills that person needs help with. And then we set up one-on-one coaching, whether it's in person in the New York, New Jersey area, or virtually. And we've developed amazing tools that we use and resources for virtual coaching so that it's as though we were working in person with that particular person. And now we work with students worldwide, not just in the United States. We've had students in Europe and Asia and Israel, really all over the world. So that's been really exciting to be able to help people who may not have access to resources in their local area.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love that it's worldwide and you have such a long reach.
Yeah,
Is
it's
there any particular success story that you want to celebrate today?
Well, I'm happy to say there have been so many success stories. One story I'll share, though, is when I first started out and I was working with students myself many years ago. There was a boy I worked with who had ADHD, severe ADHD and dyslexia. He was in kindergarten when I started working with him. He could not read, he could not write, very, very weak academic skills. And I worked with him for many years. And his mother reached out to me, I would say about a year ago now, and said that not only did he graduate college, but he went to graduate school and is working as an engineer now. And that was music to my ears, just to see someone who struggled so much in school find a career, go to graduate school, and live this wonderful life. So it's great to hear those stories.
Oh, that gives me chills. And it makes me want to go out to every little kid struggling because as you said, it starts early, so to be able to get somebody in kindergarten, and you probably helped prevent a lot of damaging shame and toxic stress by helping him through his challenges early.
Absolutely. It's the earlier the better. I'm also a big believer in building strong self-esteem. I think without that, it's challenging to be successful in life. And I think so many individuals who have ADHD or who have learning challenges really have such poor self-esteem. And it breaks my heart because they have such amazing gifts and they have such great potential. But if they don't feel that way, then it's hard to be successful in life.
Yeah, so true. I know you've already touched on some ways that you help both children and adults with ADHD, but particularly around the self-esteem.
Hmm.
Do you have any particular tools that you find are most helpful in the self-esteem department when helping these people?
Sure. Well, like I said, I think that's such a big part of this is really building self-esteem. And something that we often do is really showing students their concrete progress. So for instance, if we have a student who's very disorganized with their writing, just to give an example, and when we first start with them, they can barely put together a single paragraph and there's just a few disorganized sentences. And let's say 6 months later, they're able to write 3 paragraphs that are organized. We won't just tell them, wow, you've really improved, but let's actually take a look at what you were doing 6 months ago and what you are doing now. You should be so proud of the progress that you've made. And this is a concrete way of them seeing their progress. So instead of just loose words that they may or may not believe, we like to show concrete examples of how they're growing and how good they should feel about themselves because of this growth.
Oh, that's so good. Yeah, I know that you mentioned there are so many tools to help people. And I'm sure that on your website or your other channels, you must have a larger list.
Absolutely.
And we will certainly, share all that information in the show notes and, you know, your, but do you have any of the other tools that you would like to discuss right now?
Well, I do frequently write articles about lots of different tools that individuals, teachers, parents, students can use. I also do TikTok videos on different strategies that can help. So those are all fun to watch. And we also have Facebook and Instagram handles as well. There are so many tools and they're all specific to each individual's needs, whether it's academic, whether it's executive functioning, time management, organization. And I think really the key is identifying the ones that are best for that individual given their unique needs, and then really working on implementing them and the follow through piece.
Hmm. I heard someone say once that when you meet one person with ADHD, you've met one person with ADHD, kind of meaning that every single person has a different challenge. It's not like there's one specific type of person that gets it. For instance, if you have diabetes, there's a very specific symptomatology and treatment program for that. Do you feel like that's an accurate statement?
I do. I think there's so many different iterations of ADHD, from the very extreme to the mild and everything in between. And like I said before, it's really a matter of identifying each person's individual challenges and then working on tackling them.
Yeah. And it's very fun to do it with a coach
Oh, yeah.
because it's fun. It makes life easier. You build connections.
Definitely. It almost becomes like a mentor sort of relationship and someone to talk to. And it's a great bond that tends to be formed.
And how long do people generally work with you?
Well, it totally varies. There are some students that within 3, 4 months, they're ready to jump off on their own. And then some that continue to need the support as the demands of school continue to increase. So it totally varies based on each student's needs.
So what's the best way for someone to reach out to you if they want to hire you?
So the best way is to go to our website and contact us that way. Our email address is there. There's a contact form. There's a phone number, and just reach out and tell us a little bit about any difficulties. And then hopefully we can help them out from there. And our website, by the way, is eblcoaching.com, which I know you mentioned you'll share in the show notes. So thank you for that.
Yes, definitely. All right. One thing that I like to do at the end of each episode is give people a call to action, something they can do for themselves right now, whether they have money to invest in a coach or not, whether they have money to invest in services or not, something they can go out and do today that'll make a difference in their lives. Do you have anything like that for them?
Well, I would say if it's a parent and they're noticing that their child is struggling in school, whether it's ADHD, a learning challenges, just having difficulty with homework, reach out to school, reach out to their child's teacher and just have a conversation about it. See if their teacher's noticing the same difficulties in school. See if you can work as a team together and just really take action and always be an advocate for your child, because it's so important to do that and to do that as young as possible.
Sounds like great advice.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
Hey, everybody. As always, thanks for listening, and I hope you got something fun and useful from today's episode. If you know anybody who would like to listen, please hit that share button to help us grow. Have a great day.